Good morning, guys. Today is March 23rd, and we are in 1 Samuel chapter 9. And today we get to actually be introduced to a new character, and this is Saul. And it's only chapter 9 that we're doing today because again I'm following my reading guide, and that's the reading for today. And it's very interesting because it kind of opens up with describing who Saul was. And one of the things that it said about Saul was it started out with his lineage, but it said that he was the most handsome man in Israel, head and shoulders taller than anyone else in the land. So it was just interesting to me. Like, this is the first time you heard, I guess, more about somebody's appearance than things that just kind of went before them. Like usually you hear about why somebody was so great, but when it comes to Saul, it was basically focused on his appearance. And I think that's because God had realized that the people of Israel was more caught up with what they can see with their actual eyes than what actually was going on and what actually had been like the stuff, the stories and the history that had been passed down generation to generation, because now we're generations in, but that history, that book of instruction, is something that's constantly being taught and constantly being learned by them. So it's like they're aware of how great God was, but they still tend to put their eyes more on what they can see than what they know. So I just thought that was interesting that the focus on Saul is his appearance. So it just basically starts out with Saul's father sending him out to find the donkeys because the donkeys had been lost. So he left out with one of his servants. But one of the things that was interesting with Saul is that you can see that there was a level of obedience because he thought nothing to go out and do what his father had sent him out to do. But it seems that when he seemed like they were unsuccessful, it was one of those things that he wasn't uh I guess a person who saw the importance of completing the task that he was sent out for. So after they went looking for the donkeys and he wasn't able to find them, he was like, well, we might as well go back because at this point, my father is not even worried about the donkeys. I'm pretty sure he's more worried about me. So we need to go back. But then it was the servant who accompanied him who spoke about a man. He said, there's a man in Israel, the seer, and he might be able to help us, like, because he's known that he's able to help people and answer their problems, and what he says is true. So the servant is like, well, we could go and we could ask him if he could tell us how we could go and find the donkeys. Because I guess the servant is one of those people who, well, this is our assignment. Let's use whatever we can find to complete this assignment. And then Saul is like, well, how do we go to this seer when we don't even have anything to offer him? Like, we've already finished our food. So it just seems like Saul was again just more concerned with what was at hand as opposed to actually completing the task. But then luckily for him, the servant did have like a piece of silver, and he was like, this is not much, but at least we do have something to offer him. So he convinced Saul to come. So him and Saul went, and now they went looking for Samuel. And so it was like when they approached the gate, they were told to wait. And at the same time, it appears like Samuel was arriving as well because there was about to be an offering that he was going to sit down and partake. So it shows that when Saul actually entered the town and they passed through the gates, that Samuel was coming out. So it was like that divine, gonna call it that very divine intervention. Because the thing with Samuel is that God had already told Samuel that he would meet the person the next day. So it was he said, I will send you a man from the land of Benjamin, anoint him to be the leader of my people. He will rescue them from the Philistines, right? And so it's one of those things where two people had an assignment. It's almost like one wasn't even faithful to his, but thankfully he had somebody alongside him that understood the importance of just completing the assignment. And then Samuel was somebody who had that relationship with God, and God had already prepared him that he would meet Saul that day. So it's one of those things where Samuel was actually looking for Saul. So it said, and one of the things when God had told Samuel that he was going to send a person the next day, the thing that God said was that he heard his people's cry and that he still had mercy on them. And I think that's so important. That's so important because when we was reading the last chapter, it had kind of showed that God had said, they're not abandoning you, they're abandoning me. So even though God felt abandoned, he still understood that those were his people and he still responded to their cries to actually send somebody to save them from their current situation. And so it's one of those things where now the first thing it was funny that Saul did was he told like when he invited them to the feast to come and sit up and eat, and the first thing he was like was don't worry about the donkeys. Like the donkeys were found. Like basically they went missing 3 days ago and they've been found. So don't even worry about that. And it was one of those things where it was kind of like, well, this is what this young man is worried about. So let's just let him off the hook with that so that he could feel like, he's not like even though that assignment wasn't the greatest for him, it was the only reason why he left his house. So it was one of those things like, well, the reason that you came here has already been taken care of. Now just come and sit down. And so one of the things that Saul told him is that you and your family are the focus of all Israel's hope. And the first thing Saul said was he talked about that he was from the tribe of Benjamin. He said the smallest tribe in Israel. And it was interesting because that was exactly where God told Samuel that the next person would come from. So even though Saul felt like he was coming from some place that was so insignificant, he was literally chosen and chosen out of that place. And then the next thing he said, my family is the least important of all families. So we see like as we go on like the people that God chooses. It's almost like on one level he was the most handsome and the tallest, but then on the other level he still had a level of humility because he knew that he was from the smallest tribe and he confessed immediately that he was from a family that was the least, right? And so Saul invited them to the table and honored them, and he allowed them to sit at the head of the table, which was great honor amongst the men who were there. And once again, Saul reassured him, saying that I've been expecting to you, like eat what you would like, because this meal was actually prepared for you. Like everybody else that you see at this table, they were pretty much an afterthought. Like everything today is about you. So, regardless of how you feel, sit down, have a seat, and partake, right? This is what God has pretty much laid out for you because God has a plan and He has an assignment specifically to you, right? So it shows that He sat down with them. And then when it was over, it was like Samuel had prepared a place for Saul to now sleep. Um, and so it was on the top of the roof. And I just thought that it was kind of interesting because it's one of those things I think like if you're coming into something and you have no idea, but then you get placed in a place of honor and you get fed well above, and then the assignment that you were actually sent out there for was accomplished and then some. And then it's almost like now you take rest on a roof. And I just always see a roof as a place that just gives you a different vantage point because it's obvious that he had traveled someplace that he had never been. And I guess I'm just one of those people who, whenever I have the opportunity to enter into a new environment, like I always, like if I'm given a chance to actually have a moment to take a breath, to like just be aware of my surroundings. I just feel like the roof of a place would be such a nice vantage point. I know it's not like some skyscraper in New York, which to me probably would be not as fascinating as a regular rooftop because you could just see so much more detail from that place. But I just thought that that was interesting. And so it was like that next morning, we show that now Saul actually took him from the house, and it said he went ahead and he sent his servant ahead, and he said, "Stay the way that this chapter ended is stay here, for I have received a special message for you from God." So today was chapter 9, and I just think again, just realizing how God was looking at the situation where again he was very concerned with his people who cried out. But I guess it was almost like the one thing that stood out about Saul, which was what we see was his appearance. So it was almost like God was responding to the people in a way that they could understand or like they had kind of desired. So um that's what we are for today. And now Saul, this handsome tall man, is standing there at the with Samuel, waiting to see what's going to happen next. So I pray that you guys are enjoying digging into this word and being intentional and just seeing how God moves and understanding how He speaks and how He desires to be revered. So love you guys. Have a great day.